Thank you for that wonderful introduction. It is such an honor to be here today. When I was first invited to give this talk, I was really excited and also impressed that you have such a great organization that's reaching out and inviting a keynote speaker to talk about stress and resiliency for the incredible people that it serves, not meaning your clients, but meaning you. And so the journey that we're going to go on today is to unpack the role of the fear brain in our information processing. And my goal is to teach you some very accessible, easy tools that you can put in your pocket and use on a day-to-day basis. Not just that, but to also help you translate how to integrate these tools into your work with your clients, but also with your family. And the good news is we have one brain and one body. And they're really powerful, and they do really strong work with some basic primal functional experiences, because when it comes to stress, that's our primal brain running the show. I'm going to switch into my share screen here, so bear with me for one quick second. Today, we're going to be discussing how do we harness the opportunities of neuroplasticity to build resilience. And so on this journey, we're going to be exploring what neuroplasticity is, as well as resiliency, and how the two interact together. Additionally, in order to understand resilience, we really need to explore what is stress and anxiety, and how does that play out in our sense of self and our ability to be resilient. Interestingly, they have a very personal partnership. And when we can turn our anxiety and our stress into agency, it actually makes us more resilient. Go figure. And then we'll be wrapping up the conversation with learning some tools and tips and techniques for how do we build a resilient sense of self? How do we calm our stressed out brain when it's having a hard time? As well as how do we have a at-home brain care program to really sponsor us in being our most resilient selves? Before we begin, let's dig into what this idea of neuroplasticity is. So neuro, brain, plasticity, well, plastic. Neuroplasticity means that our brain is plastic. Okay, now we can all say that we understand that now. Our brain is not plastic. It's an amorphous blob of goo up here made up of around 80 billion neurons. But the idea of plastic here means that our brain is malleable, it's changeable. Many, many years ago, there was this old idea that once we got to the age around 24 to 26, our brain got locked in stone. Well, that myth has been debunked. The truth of the matter is our brain is constantly changing and rewiring itself to be in relationship with the environment around us. Now, in times of chronic stress, pandemic, all of our brains have been rewired if we've been living in a state of stress. But the gift is that we can actually bring our brain out of that state and build the brain that we want to live within, to build resiliency and personal empowerment, which is why we're here today having this conversation. Because those 80 billion neurons up here have relationships with each other, and they fire and wire together to all the stimuli around us. And so imagine having the opportunity in our own hands to design the brain that we want to live within. Now, that means that we have to be mindful to calm our brain down out of fear states. And we'll be talking a lot about that, while also building the neural pathways or the freeways that we want our brain accessing. But first, I'd like to introduce you to a little neuroplasticity exercise so that you can get a sense of what I'm talking about. Neuroplasticity is the opportunity to build our brain. And we're hardwired to look for what I call black dot moments, the hard things in life. But many, many positive things happen around us all the time. And when we use intentional attention to tune into the positive things and actually anchor them into our being, our brain fires and wires around those positive things more frequently and with greater strength. The fact is, we just have to do it with proactive intention. What does this look like? Well, it's as simple as having a beneficial experience, a positive experience. That can be as small as when you wake up in the morning, making your bed. Do you know that we actually get a reward in our brain when we make our bed, when we accomplish a task? We do. Or if you're on a walk, noticing the blue sky, noticing the smile of your neighbor as they wave, noticing the delightful scent of a great cup of coffee. Those are all beneficial experiences. And we have these types of experiences all the time in our life, but we just gloss through them. We don't tune into them. So neuroplasticity, in terms of building the brain within which we want to navigate our world, means when we have those moments, enriching that experience, taking a pause and absorbing it, really anchoring it into our mind and our body, inviting it to be deeply present within us. And then taking this extra step to link it with breath. Why breath? Well, breathing is a fundamental part of who we are as an organism, yes. And when we breathe, and I'm going to show you a breathing exercise to deepen this experience, but when we breathe correctly, our brain and our body are given the opportunity to relax, because when we're stressed or anxious, when we're living in swirls of stress or anxiety, our breath shortens and tightens up. And so having a beneficial experience, enriching it with intention, absorbing it, linking it into us, noticing the sensory experience of that beneficial experience, and then deepening it with breath, really invites the brain to feel safe and comfortable to say, this is something I want more of. Now, I'm going to invite us to walk into a little practice of this, because the truth of the matter is that even though our brain likes to find hard stuff, lightness is possible in every moment. We just have to find it. And this image is from a horse in the barn. I have a rescue thoroughbred that I adopted many, many years ago. And one of the things I noticed about thoroughbreds or horses, or even our dogs or cats, is that they smile. And that's how hardwired these sensory experiences are. They're primal, they are mammalian to us. And so we want to look around and find the smiles, find the moments in our days that bring us some lightness. I'd like to invite everybody to just take a gentle breath in, and if you feel comfortable, just allow your eyes to drift closed. And now I'm going to invite you to breathe in again, a slow, gentle inhale through your nose to the count of 4, 3, 2, 1, and a gentle release to the count of 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And let's float back across the course of the day, the morning, yesterday, even the days before, and find a smile. Now, this may be the smile of a loved one or a pet, maybe even the smile of the horse on the image you just saw. Perhaps the curve of a butterfly's wing, that can be a smile. The curves of petals, smile. Perhaps the smile as you breathed in a delightful cup of coffee or tea this morning. Just find a smile in your day-to-day life. And as you notice that smile, I invite you to take another gentle breath in, welcoming it into your being as you invite it to become front and center right here and right now. And let's deepen the relationship with your smile. Does it have a shape or a color, emotion or movement to it? Does your smile have a scent? Lavender or citrus, maybe minty fresh. And as you notice all the sensory components of that smile, I invite you to once again breathe gently in, deepening your breath, welcoming that smile to expand within you. And notice There's a part of you that shifts or changes in relationship with the smile. You perhaps even feel compelled to smile back. Smiles tend to be reciprocal. And if you notice a smile starting to arise for you, I invite you to just let that smile come forward. Smile back at your smile. Deepening your breath again, inviting those smiles to expand within you, breathing in their colors or their scent, their warmth, the texture, the energy. And slowly exhale as we bring this exercise to a close. And notice that at any time you can return to this smile because you just had a beneficial experience with it. Just anchored this smile into your mind and deepened its relationship with your body, which means that it's available. And I invite you to connect to it with intention. Because the more of these positive experiences we take the intentional moment to anchor into, the greater the likelihood that our brain will immediately and organically lean on these experiences in a time of stress. Our brain wants us to feel good. But here's the clutch, here's the difficulty. First and foremost, our brain is hardwired to focus on the hard stuff. We're just designed that way as humans. And why is that? Well, we go all the way back 70,000, 100,000 million years ago when the original two-legged upright vertebrates started navigating this planet. The hard stuff, the negative stuff was almost always the stuff that would kill us. So in 21st century, there's a lot of hard stuff that's not life-threatening. All the way back when our brain, when the original hardware of our system started coming online, the hard stuff was literally the life and death stuff. If we were in a drought, well, we would starve. There weren't grocery stores. If there was a tiger prowling around behind us or bushes shaking, our brain would go, oh my gosh, that thing's going to kill us. So we're still living with this ancient hardware in our system. And it has a bias that we all have. It's organic, it's neurobiological. We have a bias towards negativity. We're going to find the hard things first because our system wants us to stay alive. Nothing else matters if we can't breathe. So we naturally scan for bad news. And guess what? When we find it, we overfocus on it. And in fact, our brain works really, really hard to commit that bad news to what's called implicit memory, fact. Our brain wants the hard stuff to become truth because it really thinks that the hard stuff that we're exposed to these days is going to kill us. Now, we all know, well, we carry these little things around in our pocket that can give us news updates on a regular basis. And sometimes they're good news, but a lot of times, because bad news captures our brain and news organizations know that, the news is bad. So we are frequently exposing our brains to high levels of stress, let alone what we're doing in our day-to-day lives. Life is tough. And when we are in a career, a career that is an essential worker space, where we are in a career where we take care of others, where we are in service of humanity, life is especially tough. So just notice that experience, that our brain is designed to look for these hard things, and we can begin living in these vicious cycles of finding more and more negative information. We're again hardwired for it. And in fact, in a moment, we'll talk about how our brain will actually gossip with itself to spin fear stories. But it's not all bad news. That's why I'm here today. It's good news because now we know that we can use that information to learn, but not get anchored into the hard stuff. And that's the opportunity of neuroplasticity. And let's do a quick breathing exercise to find out how we can regulate our system just through quick breath to support our brain and our body calming down when we do get one of those news reports or a text message or an email or even somebody we love running through the door with a piece of information or just a sensory overload moment, so that we can regulate ourselves within 40 seconds. Yes, within 40 seconds. Our brain and our body want to feel good. They also want us to be alive. So there's a lot of talk around breath. And you'll notice in the previous exercise that I invited you to breathe and to inhale through your nose. And there's some really exciting new literature coming out of UCLA that talks about something called the sigh breath. Now, I want you to think about, when do you sigh? We all sigh. It's a part of breathing. It's a part of humanness. I guess when most humans sigh, and notice if this fits your pattern that you just reflected on. When we're stressed, when we're tense, or when we're really tired. All of those are times when our breath is constricted. And so the more we can do intentional breath work to expand our breath, the more we're regulating our system and enhancing very quickly our resiliency in the moment. Because guess what? Stress and a low level of oxygen creates more stress, versus stress with plentiful oxygen allows our brain and our body to know that, oh, okay, even if there's stress out there, I can take action. So how do we increase the amount of oxygen that the body retains from each breath? So Jack Feldman, who's over at UCLA, like I mentioned, created the sigh breath. And I'll invite all of you to practice this with me. What it looks like is a double breath. So we're going to inhale through our nose once, and then before we exhale, we're going to inhale again. So what it looks like is the 2 breaths and then the release. So you notice what we're talking about here is increasing oxygenation in our body. And I'll invite everybody to do that one more time. And notice if already you feel a little more relaxed. Dr. Feldman's research actually indicates that in doing that, our heart rate will lower significantly within 40 seconds, hence asking you to do it 3 times. Another simple tool that I invite you to take that heel exercise. So let's go back and find your smile. Bring that front and center. And now as you're holding your smile, noticing that experience that you anchored into a moment ago, that heel moment, let's do that double sigh breath. And one more time, we're inviting that smile to deepen into relationship with us. That, my friends, is neuroplasticity. It's simple. Our brain loves to be regulated. Let's talk about what gets in the way of our system being healthy and regulated. And that's this little part of our brain called the amygdala. So it is literally one of the most powerful parts of our brain. It plays a huge role in how we make sense of the world. And in our conscious understanding, that negativity bias I just mentioned is all about our amygdala. Now, I lovingly call our amygdala Amy. This is an area of specialized study for me. I've been studying the amygdala and fear for around 20 years now. And Amy is our fierce warrior, maternal, protective part of us. She's the one who is always back there taking care of us and saying, stay alive. But that means she's always looking out for danger. And how fast is she? Well, I'll invite you to blink your eyes one time. Yeah, eye blinks really fast, right? Our amygdala starts chiming into our information processing experience 4 times faster than an eye blink. 4 times. Whew. That is so fast. And when do you think it is that our self brain starts coming online? Blink again. Yeah. The amount of time it takes for you to blink is the amount of time it takes for your thinking brain to chime into the conversation. And that means that if Amy's experienced a threat and she's starting to take over, well, she's in charge. Because what happens is we're sensory creatures before we're anything else. Our thinking brain doesn't start making sense of the world until the sensory experience is already being defined and creating a narrative for us. And how fast is that? Well, something happens and our thalamus is brought into the picture. And we'll talk later about how our thalamus is a wonderful opportunity for creating the brain that we want to live in, for defining our information processes. But for right now, I just want you to imagine that the thalamus is a post office. It brings in all this data and it's going, where does this information go? And if the thalamus assesses any sense of threat in a given moment, that threat is sent straight to our amygdala. And Amy goes, I'm going to start paying attention to this. And if she goes, yes, thalamus, you're correct. There was a little bit of a threat there. You'll notice that she'll start to actually shift how our brain is processing. She has the capacity to start to pull more energy from our system. And then she'll get our emotional brain involved, what's known as our limbic system. And she'll start looking at all of the experiences across the course of our life, but also across the course of our species, right? We have something that are called unconditioned threat stimuli that we're born with, creepy crawlies, heights, where our brain goes, I know those things are not so great for us because they've killed enough of us in the past, enough of us being our species, that our brain has said, I'm remembering this. And it isn't until much later, like we've talked about, that our thinking brain is invited to chime in. But if our amygdala senses a big enough threat, she'll start to hijack us. So how does our amygdala start to play a role? Well, there's this other part of our brain called the working memory. It's actually a system. It's not really a part of our brain, so pardon that mistaken statement there. And the working memory is a really simple part of our system that operates at about 7 plus or minus 2 bits of data. And a really easy way to understand it is this is why phone numbers are the length that they are. 7 plus or minus 2. Well, you got yourself a phone number there now, don't you? And what our working memory does is it starts to say, what do we know about the information that the amygdala is sensing? Because amygdala only speaks with the 5 senses. Amy is all about what we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. She's not involved in our thinking. And if she's sensing a threat, though, because of the working memory, our thinking brain will then start to chime into that threat. And if the thinking brain goes, ooh, yeah, I have an experience where we remember this being threatening, then that will start to create these yellow light caution moments where now our amygdala and our thinking brain are colluding. They're going, we are in danger. Now, here's what's so interesting. 90% of our present moment is defined by these unconscious processes, by our past. Now, unconscious is a common colloquial term, but really what we're talking about is these limbic system experiences and these more primal, what I call the hardware of our brain experiences. That is creating the narrative framework of the present moment. And only about 10% of our brain's functioning is really based in the here and now. That's pretty big data. And so if our brain's going, back in 1983, I remember something that was kind of threatening that reminds me of this thing that the amygdala is sensing right now. Think about the pandemic. Think about sneezing. Sneezing didn't used to be a threat, right? But now, especially throughout the course of 2020, sneezing definitely became a threat. And so our thinking brain now is feeding back into the amygdala. And back in 1983, so let's say, for example, you might have gotten very sick back in 1983. Your brain's going, ooh, 2020 pandemic data. And man, I've been very sick before. Amy's going to ping up another piece of data, and then the thinking brain and our amygdala are going to start gossiping in loops until the brain gets really, really freaked out. Now, it's easy to use a pandemic as an example, as we've all lived through that and been within that. But this can go anywhere from turning a corner and seeing something move really rapidly if you've been insulted in the past. This could go from receiving a series of really difficult text messages from a client or from a patient or a family member, and your brain starts to interpret those text messages, even the ding of a text message, as now becoming a red light stop moment, because the brain is saying anything that dings on my phone is bad news. And when that gets bright enough and enough little receptors in the amygdala light up, we can start to function in what's known as a stress space, or in really severe circumstances, PTSD. We put on these little fear glasses or stress glasses, and our brain starts to operate in a different way. Anybody been there? I know I certainly have. 2020 has been a really tough year. 2021, where we are right now. Yeah, it's been tough. But life is tough. Again, there's a lot of hard things that happen in life. And unfortunately, the universe doesn't tend to throw just one tough thing at us. Tough things tend to come in multiples, just like all of these little grenades back here in our amygdala. And so if we have enough hard things and we're not intentionally regulating ourselves, we'll get bumped out of our window of tolerance. Now, our window of tolerance is the state of homeostatic balance. This is where our fear brain, or our stress brain, and our thinking brain are able to have healthy, loving conversations with one another. Sure, Amy might go into that yellow light mode, but our thinking brain's able to say, no, that's just a text message, or, oh, that's just a sneeze, or, oh, that's just a cat in an alleyway. Instead of Amy going, red light, I'm taking over brain, and our thinking brain's going, I'm on board with you. Whatever that movement was is definitely going to hurt me. Or being exposed to a sneeze and the brain going home and saying, you know what, I'm sick now. I feel like I'm getting a sore throat. I feel foggy, even if you're perfectly well. Little known piece of data. Our amygdala plays a significant role in the physical presence of different experiences. And she can actually start to manifest different types of physical experiences tied to our fears and our worries. So what I just said about being exposed to somebody sneezing, and this happened to one of my patients, walked outside, somebody sneezed right at her back in, I guess this was June of 2020. And she went home and went into a panic cycle around fearfulness about having the coronavirus. It's called health anxiety. Our amygdala loves to spin up stories, and man, they are immersive. You might as well be in a panic room. You're not living this 2D. She is a 3D, 4D operator when it comes to fear, because she really wants to make sure that we're paying attention. And if we start living outside our window of tolerance, so if we're not listening to those yellow light moments and calming our amygdala down, then we can start to cycle in this experience of hyperarousal, being overreactive, having cognitive fogginess, as well as hypoarousal. And the more we do that, guess what? The smaller our window of tolerance. And so just take a moment and notice, where are you? Are you living in your window of tolerance with intention or not? Resiliency is the extra ingredient that ensures that we do live within our window of tolerance. It keeps us balanced. So resiliency is the capacity to recover from adversity, to pursue our goals despite challenges, and it helps us survive the worst day of our lives, but also thrive every single day of our lives. Because guess what? If we're knocked out of our window of tolerance, it can take anywhere from 12 to 36 hours for our system to organically rebalance itself. And so one of the reasons we're here today is to learn some techniques of how do we hack the system? How do we help the brain get into our window of tolerance much more quickly so that we are thriving and in our most resilient state? And here's the thing. We have the opportunity, just as shown by Calvin here, to turn our bumps into triumphs. Life is full of falls. We will fall down, we will stumble. And when we help our system understand that those stumbles are actually opportunities for wisdom and growth, we'll have these ta-da moments. But we have to help our brain get there because, again, we're hardwired for negativity. We're hardwired for survival. So it takes intentional attention. Now, Viktor Frankl wrote a fabulous book called Man's Search for Meaning that is all about surviving the absolute worst. He's a psychiatrist who was interned at Auschwitz during the Holocaust. And when he was able to leave Auschwitz, he survived. Obviously, he wrote this book. He discussed the trials and the tribulations and the philosophy of survival. And one of the things that really clicked for him is this capacity to choose our response no matter how hard the moment is. The data that he was missing, though, because he was a very wise human, and it'd be great for all of us to be as wise as him. But the piece of data that he was missing is that we don't have choice when Amy takes over. And so we're going to learn that CPR for the amygdala tool that I mentioned a moment ago, because that creates choice, that creates the organic space to have Amy step down so that our thinking brain is available. So what is CPR for the amygdala? First, let's talk about what innately soothes our organism. Well, we love hugs. If you see somebody having a rough day, you might put your hand on their shoulder and run it down their arm and go, hey, are you okay? We'll reach for somebody's hand naturally. These are emotions that we do because we're biologically hardwired for attachment as well as touch. And there's something called the self-havening touch that changes the biochemical state of our brain. Really, really cool. So just like we did that side breath a moment ago, which would bring your heart rate down, these touches here that I'll walk you through in just a minute bring your brain state down. How cool is that? So this is new science. It's been around for about 10, 15 years. And the self-havening touch is based on these hardwired things that we're biologically going to be doing with our loved ones anyway. What does it look like? Well, the first touch goes right across the brow. And perhaps you've seen a parent with an infant gently caressing that infant's brow and notice that perhaps the infant started to settle, or if you're a parent yourself, maybe you've done that yourself. Second touch is right under your cheeks. Now, what do we do for wiping away tears? Go figure, right under those cheeks. And then hugs. I like to call this a moving hug. So we're crossing our arms, resting our fingertips on our shoulders, and just running our hands gently down to our elbows over and over again, giving ourselves a nice, soothing, moving hug. I also call this a hug hack. So if you're ever on a Zoom call with a loved one and they're not vaccinated yet, you're not able to see them during this difficult time, just go ahead and give them a big havening hug. And then finally, just like you're reaching out to hold somebody's hand, going to be just gently palm havening, rubbing your palms together. If you remember at the beginning of the pandemic, back in March, April, May, and June, all those memes going around where people were singing songs and while you washed your hands, that was actually regulating the nervous system. How cool is that? So these motions, and I'm ready to follow along with me. So you're just making a 3 around your eyes, down your face, to your shoulders, and to your hands, are all releasing serotonin. They're creating a greater presence of serotonin, GABA, which is a soothing neurochemical, as well as oxytocin. So you might remember serotonin from those antidepressant commercials. Oxytocin is an attachment hormone. It's what we get when we feel close and connected to somebody. And GABA is soothing. If you've ever been prescribed or known somebody who's been given gabapentin, that is a exogenous mechanism for getting more GABA in the brain. And here we have an endogenous, which means internal mechanism. So how cool is that? You don't even have to take a pill. Just give yourself a nice hug and you'll be feeling a little bit better. But what is actually happening here, in addition to those neurochemicals showing up, is we're putting the brain into what is known as a delta wave state. This is a sleepy wave state. When we're in a state of anxiety or hyper awareness, our brain goes into very fast brainwave activity. This is characterized by the release of something called norepinephrine, adrenaline, which you might be familiar with, cortisol, and also glutamate. These really fast brainwave states have a very real psychophysiological presence. It can kind of feel like electricity in our mind or our body. And this is what sponsors that ruminating. This is where Amy gets stuck in that loop with the working memory and the thinking memory that we were just talking about. And when this brainwave state is high enough, this is what will actually result in an encoding. So an experience that our brain's going to remember forever in the amygdala that will then be able to play into our present moments. Like I was just talking about, if you got really sick in 1983, or the news exposure that we've all been given throughout the course of the pandemic of just a simple sneeze and what that could mean. Those are experiences that may have created an encoding in your amygdala. And when those encodings happen, our brain is in this very fast brainwave state and can be triggered back into this brainwave state at any time in the future. So what do we want to do? Well, we want to create the opposite experience of that encoding. And until recently, we did not know that we could downregulate our brain, just like we can downregulate our heartbeat. And CPR for the amygdala is a protocol that downregulates your brain so that you have greater resiliency, hence creating personal resiliency for the amygdala. So we're creating space to find the wisdom within those challenges and have that Calvin and Hobbes aha moment. Ta-da, that's what we all want. We want a little bit more of that. But what does CPR for the amygdala look like? So it sounds pretty cool. If we can do CPR for our amygdala and help Amy calm down so that she's not impacting us, that's a great plan. And my patients love it. I use it on a regular basis. I teach it to everybody that I know because, man, a happy amygdala leads to a happier humanity. So what we're going to be doing is applying those self-havening touches and playing some brain games. Because remember that working memory space, very simple bits of data that is feeding the amygdala and putting on those sphere glasses. And so if we give that part of a brain a different job, then Amy can't serve up the stories of the hard stuff. Our thinking brain is doing something else. And the good news, since it is a primal part of our brain, it only takes some really simple distractions to do this. And overall, what we're doing is cultivating a sense of agency, because we know that we have a tool in our pocket. We can pull that out, do a little CPR for the amygdala, and help our brain calm down. Guess what? That's a I've got this moment, which our brain loves. But here's the secret. When we're doing this, we're not only downregulating our brain out of that fast electrochemical state of stress or anxiety, we're actually helping to de-link those little receptors from our past that are intruding in our present moment and causing distress or disturbance. We're proactively healing our brain, healing in our hands. This, to me, as a psychologist, as a neuroscientist, is one of the most exciting initiatives of the 21st century. Because guess what happens when we know that we have the capacity for self-healing? Less use of medications, less use of services. I would love to put myself and my teams out of business. It means that we all have the capacity to know that we have our own back and we can start to shift the way that we interact in our world. And it starts with us, those of us on the front lines who are serving these incredible populations who have a lot of pain and also a lot of opportunity for healing. And all of that is empowering, right? We're bringing ourselves back into our window of tolerance. We're teaching our friends, our colleagues, our clients, our children how to bring themselves back into the window of tolerance, which then starts a whole new cycle. So remember that vicious cycle of the negativity bias that we were talking about, that ruminating loop? Well, imagine the opportunity to create a new empowering cycle. And CPR for the amygdala is a really important way to get that process rolling. And the good news is, like I mentioned, it's primal. This is old hardware. I know the first amygdala is notated to come on the landscape of vertebrates around 300 million years ago. 300 million. I can't even imagine 300 million years. There's nothing in my world that is 300 million years old, except for the design of my own amygdala and the design of yours. So because it is so primal, it's very, very simple. We just need to notice when our amygdala is sending up a yellow flag, a yellow light moment, and go, oh, hi, Amy, I see you, I hear you, you're worried about something. Now, if we have the opportunity to take what's called a SUDS, this is like a pain scale, I'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment, that's great. Just write down the number of where would you rank this level of activation on a scale of 0 to 10, and then apply the self-havening touch. And then engage in some brain games. Now, what does that look like? I usually recommend doing 3 different distractions. So the first distraction might be singing around of Old MacDonald or row, row, row your boat. The second distraction might be going A to Z and finding a living thing for every letter of the alphabet, or perhaps finding an animal for every letter of the alphabet, a place in the world for every letter of the alphabet. If you like music, a band for every letter of the alphabet, all while continuing to apply that self-havening touch. And then I usually like to wrap up with counting. So I'll count forwards by a set of numbers and backwards by a set of numbers. That's it. And then check back in on that experience of distress or disturbance. All you have to do. Now we have a YouTube channel where we have a bunch of exercises that you can practice and see this done in real time. But for the process today, we're just going to unpack this a little bit more and then transition into the neuroplasticity opportunity. The goal here is to simply check in on what's happening. And you'll see it's written down right here. Check in on what's happening. Do a distraction brain game. You can sing. You can imagine that you're swimming laps if you like to swim. And you can imagine, you're walking on a beach or doing yoga, whatever it might be. We're just giving the brain a different job while applying that self-havening touch. Now, why do we gather the SUDS? Well, one of the things that's really important for our brain is for our brain to know that we're paying attention to our mind and body in any given moment. And one of the best ways to do that, well, simply take a rating. Our brain loves numbers. And so this is called a SUD scale. And it's just like a traditional pain scale. If your doctors ever asked you on a scale of 0 to 10, where would you rank your pain? It's the exact same thing. And we use it for both emotional pain as well as physical pain. So a 0, I like to think about as zen or calm. It doesn't have to be happy. We're actually not going for happy. We're just going for a sense of calm or overarching well-being, neutral. And a 10 is the most excruciating pain you've ever experienced in your life. It's important to note here that this is subjective. It's not about where you would think somebody else would rank what you're experiencing in that moment of distress. The only thing that matters is you honoring the data of your mind and body. And once you've done your CPR for the amygdala exercise, I recommend, as you see here, this assess, checking back in on your SUDS, noticing if it's shifted or changed from that round of distractions that you just participated in while doing the havening touch. If it has, fabulous. And keep doing CPR for the amygdala until you're at a 2 or below. That is proactively healing your amygdala, and it's regulating your system. It's bringing you back into that window of tolerance. And over time, you can actually expand your window of tolerance. You can, and that's what resiliency is. It means your window of tolerance is much wider than it used to be. But just because we've healed the amygdala and helped her calm down doesn't mean we stop the process there. We also want to be mindful to invite in the development of new neural freeways. How do we want to feel in our day-to-day life? And that's where this creating possibilities protocol comes in. Now you can do this without the application of the self-havening touch, but our brain is more receptive to firing and wiring in the direction we want it to go when we have greater serotonin, oxytocin, and GABA. That means our thinking brain is more actionable rather than the norepinephrine and freaked out stressed brain of the amygdala. So once you've done your CPR for the amygdala, the next step is to identify how would you like to feel? And that's where we're releasing the past and building the future. So that our brain in the future, remember that 90% of the passage is defined by 90% of each moment is defined by the past. Well, we're building the future free ways so that in the future, our past will still be showing up, but we now have the opportunity for our brain to link into the direction we want to go. We're moving into ownership with the preferred emotion or felt sense and harnessing neuroplasticity through repetition and the development of curiosity, which curiosity releases acetylcholine, which links into our brain's desire to learn and enhances the experience of learning. And so this is another stepwise process, just like the CPR for the amygdala, ultimately supporting us and saying, hey, brain, I want you to meet this new felt sense. I want to feel more confident. And so we're going, what if I was more confident? And we're inviting in the opportunity to move into relationship with that, just like you invited in the smile earlier, until eventually we have that new future in place. So what does this protocol look like? Like I mentioned, we're using curiosity, and I threw out this idea of what if. So I'd like to invite everybody to just pay attention for a moment to a felt sense that you would like more of in this moment. Perhaps a sense of calm, confidence, maybe energy to prepare you for the rest of your day. Excited. What would you like more of? And then you can welcome in. You can do it right now if you'd like as I'm walking through this, or just tuck this away for later practice. Welcome in the havening touch and ask yourself quietly in your mind's eye, what if? What if I was calm? What if I was excited? And I'd like to suggest making that question as big, bold, and vibrant as you can. What if? Because it really gets that curiosity going, and that starts that acetylcholine generation. That starts our brain and going, I want to know more about this. And we're telling our brain it matters by putting a question mark at the end of the sentence. Our brain loves to answer questions. Amy will tell us or create questions about death and survival, but our thinking brain will just answer any question. So if Amy's the one asking the question, guess what? Our thinking brain will answer with stories of doom and gloom. If we're using our thinking brain to ask the question, then our thinking brain will answer with stories of positivity and affirmation. So we go from what if and repeat that question 5 times to the experience of I can be, noticing, can you embody that what if state that you just identified? We're gradually expanding the options in our brain to link into it. And so I suggest asking that same statement 5 times. I can be calm, or I can be confident. And then finally moving into I will be confident. I will be confident. Deepening our sense of connection and building deeper intention, and finally connecting into if it feels true, I am confident, or I am calm. So link into your preferred sense. We want to identify how do you want to feel, and choose one singular emotion: confident, calm, energetic, excited, and query your brain 5 times about that feeling state. What if, what if, what if, what if, what if? And then moving into I can be, I can be, I can be, I can be, I can be. And then I will be, so on and so forth. And finally, if it feels possible, so if you're checking in on that felt sense, go, how true does this felt sense feel right now? I will be confident. How true does that feel on a scale of 0 to 100%? If it feels 100% true, own it. I am confident. I am calm. Really link into that experience and take ownership of it. So it's a super easy hack, but we want to be mindful to be honoring our system every step of the way. So that if you notice the what ifs, and then your brain goes, I can be. You try that statement on and your brain goes, not quite there yet. Listen to that and go back to those what ifs. What we're doing is building a neural freeway. So let's revisit our brain here. Apologies for my slide right there. So we have a stressful experience that our brain is linking into. It's happened. Our senses experienced it, and Amy's going, that's definitely stressful. And our thinking brain's going, indeed, that is stressful. I don't like it. It reminds me of these other times. And now our thinking brain and our amygdala are gossiping, and they are narrating stories of doom. We are in what's known as that ruminating thought process, that anxious cycle, where every little thing that could possibly feel bad suddenly starts to be stampeding into our brain, and we just can't shut it off. Ever been there? I know I've been there. And what we're doing with CPR for the amygdala is giving this working memory a new job. We're saying, stop gossiping about the bad stuff. We don't like it. We don't want it, Amy. We don't need it. We're actually okay. This is not a threat to life. And while we're doing that through inviting in that havening touch and playing those brain games, we're removing those ruminating loops until guess what? There's no more gossiping. Our brain is calm. We're now down at that 0 to 2 of SUDs. Our system's going, oh, okay. And then we bring in the what ifs. And here's why. We want our thinking brain to have a different relationship with our thalamus so that in a time of stress, our thalamus can now loop into a different way of thinking and feeling. Something comes in and our thinking, our thalamus goes, quick threat assessment. Yeah, that feels a little stressful to me. But the thinking brain jumps in and goes, hey, guess what? Stressful is actually good. Instead of anxious, we can be excited. Instead of scared, we can be courageous. Instead of worried, we can be curious. Because those statements actually have very similar psychophysiological presence in our brain, but it's the thinking brain and the amygdala narrative, the story that we tell about those statements, that then can either become a catastrophe or become the opportunity for great healing and growth. That's so simple. CPR for the amygdala and creating possibilities. We're letting Amy know that we see her and we feel her. And the more that we bring in our breath practice, the more we're expanding our body sense of safety in the world, so that by breath, alongside those heal moments where we're intentionally focusing in on beneficial experiences and anchoring them into our mind and our body with breath, the more positive neural freeways we have, the more our system can be in this great blue cycle of resiliency, rather than getting caught up in that nightmare amygdala space where our brain literally thinks there's a tiger in every corner of the space that we're in, except for we know there's not. So we're letting her know there's no tigers, and that instead, actually, maybe it's Calvin and Hobbes, and that's Hobbes in the corner there, and you're off on a great adventure. But let's pull this all the way back. So we've learned some great, easy tools and techniques here. And how do we bring this into our day-to-day life? It's great to do these things on an ad-need basis, but guess what? As humans, we are pattern-based creatures. We love routine. Our brain feels safe. And we put the word safe on the table. That immediately means we're acknowledging and giving a head nod to our amygdala. Our amygdala feels safe when we have structured routines. They want to be mindful to build out a daily brain care program. So when you wake up in the morning, I invite you to first sit up, because delta waves, guess what? Remember we talked about those are sleepy waves. So sit up, put your feet on the floor, and do a self-assessment check-in. How are you feeling? You know, that idea of waking up on the wrong side of the bed? Well, that actually means that A, you probably went to bed a little late, but also that your amygdala was active during the night. Our amygdala doesn't sleep. She's actually the reason we have nightmares, night terrors. She's the reason that we'll pop awake in the middle of the night with a to-do list running through our brain. or maybe I'm the only one who does that, but all of those experiences are amygdala driven. And so when we wake up feeling a little off or already anxious or overwhelmed for the tasks that are awaiting us that day, and especially if you're struggling with burnout, this is critical. Take a moment, do a self-assessment, and write down your SUDs. How are you feeling first thing in the morning? Then, if you're anything above a 2, take a moment and do some brain games. Imagine you're walking on a beach and count your steps as you walk. Imagine you're bouncing a basketball and shooting some hoops. Count the hoops as you shoot them. A to Z bands, whatever it might be. Give your amygdala some love and help her calm down, because you're giving yourself some love. You're decreasing your stress and putting yourself back in your window of tolerance before you start your day. Then ask yourself, how do you want to feel today? What do you want to carry with you all day long? What type of energy? Do you need to feel courageous because you're going into some difficult situations? Do you need to feel confident because you have a big lecture that you're giving? Do you just want to feel calm? Perhaps it's a Saturday or a Sunday and you just want to feel connected to your family because you've had a whirlwind of a week and your brain's still going, focusing on all of the things on the to-do list. And you're going, I just want to connect with my family. Then bring in the creating possibilities exercise to connect. So we can generate any state that we want and go through that what if, I can be, I will be, I am exercise. Then throughout the course of your day, look for opportunities to create proactive healing. Now, opportunity for proactive healing is traditionally under the vernacular of what we would call a trigger. So triggers are Amy sending up a yellow flag saying, pay attention to this. Every time Amy sends up a yellow flag, that is an opportunity to do your self-empowered healing. Calm her down, wrap her in a warm, fuzzy blanket, let her know you're okay. There is not a tiger out to get you. Unless there is a tiger, then get out of Dodge and find a calm space where you can then put that warm, fuzzy blanket around her. But use those moments and change the frame. Remember, so much of stress is about the story of our brain. Am I scared or am I courageous? Am I worried or am I curious? Change the narrative. And it's really important as we're changing the narrative to down-regulate Amy in those moments. And the simple act of pulling out this tool and doing CPR for the amygdala immediately changes the narrative because you're using agency, internal locus of control. You are moving into a state of personal empowerment every single time you do that. And if you have time after you've done your CPR for the amygdala, follow up with your creating possibilities protocol or a heal moment. Go back to your smile, anchor that in more deeply, or return to your what if, whatever that intention was that you set for the day, just ask yourself that question again. What if I was calm? What if I was connected? Whatever that might be. Be very mindful and intentional about always following up an Amy moment with an intentional thrive moment, a possibilities moment. Build the freeways that you want your brain to be navigating. This sponsors your brain in creating new healthy connections. And like we've been talking about, building the freeway system that your brain is best served navigating. Build the brain you want to live in. And at the end of the day, review your day. Because yes, we have those days where we are just clipping through and there is not a breath to be found. Now you have the side breath. So if you're clipping through your day really rapidly and you notice your system is building up, take a moment and practice that side breath exercise. But at the end of your day, find an opportunity for calm and then review your day. Be intentional about creating self-healing moments. What did that look like? Well, reviewing and finding those trigger points, those moments where you maybe weren't your best self or you felt a little off kilter, and just invite in, attune back to those experiences, and then invite in your calm and self-healing with the CPR for the amygdala. And then as you transition into bed, invite in a new what if I was sleepy? CPR for the amygdala before bed is great. Counting sheep, that's an exercise you enjoy with a little self-havening. will help clear out your brain before you transition into sleepy time. So your amygdala will be less likely to play a role in defining how your sleep progresses for the evening. And what if I was sleepy? It's a wonderful question to ask before bed, because the brain's going to think about the opportunity of being sleepy and slowly move into that space. Thank you for this opportunity to share with you. I wish you all the best on your healing journey. Neuroplasticity is an incredible gift. And like I mentioned before, I do recommend teaching these really simple exercises to the people in your world, whether it be clients, family members, children. CPR for the amygdala is super fun to do with kiddos. And when we're doing CPR with kiddos, we call it GABA games. And we talk about the different games that we're going to play, whether it be singing songs. You can do jokes with your kiddos. So each person tells a joke or tells stories together. And one of our favorites with families is each person in the family says 4 words of a story, and the next person has to pick up on the story, which is really, really fun, all while applying the self-havening touch to downregulate the system and create opportunities for not just autonomic nervous system regulation, but actual healing of the brain and the body. As I mentioned earlier, we do have a YouTube channel that has all sorts of great exercises, psychoeducational videos, and all sorts of guided tools for CPR for the amygdala. And we do have a Healing the Fear Brain series that if you'd like to review this or share this information with somebody who wasn't with us today, please check out the Healing the Fear Brain series on the YouTube channel. It's just my name, Dr. Kate Truitt, and share that forward. It's shareware. We created it at the beginning of the pandemic, and it's been a really wonderful joy sharing these tools with humanity. So thank you again, and I wish you all the best.